I've got 6:01. Mr. Attorney, can we start?
Yes, you can.
Be it resolved that the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors, Montgomery County, Virginia, hereby enters into a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing the following: discussions concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of an existing business or industry where no previous announcement has been made of the business or industry interest in locating or expanding its facility in the community. 1. Project number 2018-013. 2. Project 2018-024. Second item, discussion or consideration of acquisition of real property for the public purpose or disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body. 1. The consolidated collection site in Allegheny Springs. The third matter is discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotions, performance, demotions, salaries, disciplinary, or resignation of specific officers, appointees, or employees of any public body. 1. New River Community College Board. 2. The Planning Commission. 3. The Social Services Board. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Is there a motion to come out of closed meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Okay. Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Certification of closed meeting. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.23711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County, Virginia hereby certifies to the best of each member's knowledge only public business matters lawfully exempted from an open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion conveying the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the Board. And this certification is our Board's word to you that we're not discussing things that we're not supposed to back in that closed meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
6 ayes.
The next item on our agenda is a moment of silence, and then I would ask the county administrator to lead us in the pledge.
Let's pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
Before we go any further, you may notice that there's only 6 of us here, and the 7th, Sarah Bowman, is performing a different type of community service. She is out with a group of Boy Scouts out, as I understand it, out in the Grand Canyon. Is that correct? And I don't think you would call that a vacation necessarily, but clearly that's a big commitment and a big part of a service to our community. And so she will not be joining us this evening. The next item, is there a motion to add a presentation by the ACE program?
Yes, I'd like to make that motion to add that to the agenda.
At the presentation recognition portion?
Yes,
Is there a
sir.
second?
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on that addition?
Okay. Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Next up is presentations, and the first is the Virginia Department of Transportation. Mr. Clark.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Our presentation here tonight will be talk a little bit about just some of the maintenance things we've been working on since last time. And I don't believe I was at the meeting here last time, this is the beginning of the new fiscal year, so we're able to reconcile our budget from last year and now start on maybe a little bit more aggressive patching than we were able to do under last year's funding, since it was the end of that fiscal year. We will be patching in front of the surface treatment schedules. All the overlay schedules have to be patched before we get to those. Most of the plant mix asphalt overlay work that the county had scheduled is done. That included North Fork Road, Route 603. We've done Luster's Gate Road, about 3 miles of it. And I think they're working on Route 11 right now in the Plum Creek area. I don't think they haven't done the Route 8 portion yet, and that's going to be to the Floyd County line, the southern part of Route 8. Still some work to do. I think I went down Luster's Gate. They got the shoulder stone out there. They don't have the lines down there yet. The pavement markings on the side. Still got quite a bit of surface treatment, the chip seal surface treatment. Several roads on that schedule, most notably probably Vicar Road, George's Run, and Flatwoods. There's a few others on there, and we will do a little bit of slurry seal, mostly in some subdivisions. So those are still yet to come throughout the summer. Other than that, we've just been your normal grading, gravel roads, cutting brush. Pretty dry June. Things are getting a little dusty, so we're putting down some of that dust inhibitor and trying to get the first round of mowing done. We put down dust control already on Paul School Road, Old Rough, and 5 Points Road, all out in the Reiner area. The projects that we have going right now, we're doing a half-mile section of Yellow Sulphur Road on the Christiansburg end. We're getting more towards the middle now, but it's closer to the Christiansburg end. That's a half-a-mile section that should be done in mid-September. We're working on the design of the last mile of Yellow Sulphur Road to get it paved or hard surfaced all the way through. There was I got a question from Mr. Fijikowski on Willis Hollow about the 6-year plan, on whether Willis Hollow was on that 6-year plan. It is not, and the part that was done several years ago was done under the revenue sharing portion. So we'll be done with Yellow Sulphur this year. We'll have another public hearing for the 6-year plan. There's citizens, or if there's a request to add another section of Willis Hollow, it has the qualifying traffic to be on the 6-year plan. It's just not on the 6-year plan as of now. And the part that was done under revenue sharing. The county's done quite a bit of paving, surface treating of unpaved roads through the revenue sharing program. The next one we're going to do should start in a few weeks, and that'll be Brush Creek Road. We're going to do the upper end of Brush Creek Road, about a half a mile of it, from the Dobbins Hollow, kind of the Floyd County line intersection at the top of that ridge, down that hill, around the curve, down for about a half a mile. I know Mr. Kingsman waiting for us to get to that, and we will get to that. We're working on a road in they should finish that one up, but we have one crew that has to serve a lot of several counties, so they're doing Brush Creek Road next. They should be able to start, if not next week, then the week after, depending on the weather. The only other thing to mention is VDOT is, we had a meeting a few weeks ago down in Salem on Interstate 81. There's a study underway to try to decide what can be done, if anything, about even in pieces. Obviously, there's not enough money to completely 6-lane all of 81, 300 miles of it from Bristol up to Winchester. So we're looking at pieces of it. They've had these public information, public hearing type of meetings to get public input with a lot of data given on the large display boards of congestion and accidents and just how unpredictable it can be traveling 81 sometimes. In conjunction with that effort, and one of the things that didn't come out of that, that VDOT was already going to do is a section in Roanoke County between the Mason Creek exit and the 143 exit for Route 581 into Roanoke. There's adding a third lane in the northbound direction to assist in traffic trying to get to 581. There are no projects for any capacity plan in this area right now. There is a exit 114 study and a plan to replace the bridge on that, but never, that has issues. That causes a lot of delays just in maintenance of that bridge. But what we're going to work on now in conjunction with the capacity of the road itself is what do you do when you have an incident on the road of some kind. As you know, wrecks on the road can cause backups of miles and miles and miles. And we're going to be holding meetings with the localities. It won't be a public meeting, but we're going to, in consultation with the localities, try to rework a plan that we did a long time ago, an incident management plan. What do you do when you have a wreck, let's say, between 109 and 114? Where do you detour? Do you detour? Do you make traffic get off? Do you just let them, if they want to sit, let them sit. If they want to get off, let them get off. At what point do you force traffic off? Obviously, if you've got some kind of major hazmat spill or major, disaster, you're going to want to get everybody off the interstate. Some wrecks can be cleaned up in, a matter of half an hour, or something like that. But we're going to take another look at our incident management plan that we've had in place for probably 20 years. And we'll do this in consultation with the locality. So we'll be inviting the county, town of Christiansburg. We'll be all doing this with Pulaski County. We'll invite the city of Radford. And then down in Pulaski County, we'll have Dublin and the town of Pulaski County. So I'll be sending an email to Mr. Meadows about that, and to Neil Turner to have some emergency people there. And the locality, the county will certainly be able to have a couple of people, few, if they would like to have at this meeting. It'll be on July 24th down in Salem. The time is yet to be determined, but it'll be early afternoon for a while. So I want to let you know we're working on that. And there'll be we got a consultant who's helping facilitate this gathering of information, gathering of input from the localities. As you know, a lot of times, there aren't very many options. If 81's blocked, there's only a few ways you can go. So, but it's at least good to look at these plans every once in a while, make sure everyone's on the same page at least. So we'll have a product at the end that we can give to the county so they know, all right, we're going to plan A or whatever. So the county knows, the town knows, and we all know this is what we're doing. And whose role, because everyone has a role, just when something like that happens, county emergency management probably already on the scene if it's a big wreck like that, but town transportation people to Christiansburg, they need to know that we're going to be sending tractor trailers through downtown Christiansburg at one point. So that's coming up, and there'll be an email from me probably tomorrow or the next day on that. And that's all I have as far as updates go.
Supervisor King?
No questions. Thank you.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Yeah, David, you had mentioned something about qualifying traffic. I'm not familiar with that. For a road to be...
Oh, to use the funding that we have, it just has to have over 50 vehicles a day.
Okay.
So the type of funding that's the majority of your secondary construction funds has to go to unpaved roads with a traffic count of over 50 a day. If you have a smaller road that we'd like to do, there is some discretionary funds that could be done. It's much less than that, and you might have to wait a while to get that. But yes, there's probably twice that on Willis Hollow. So
now, I know you guys got a lot of roads and little money to take care of them all, but I had a citizen that had asked me, and now I can't even think of the name of the road. It's up in Allegheny Springs. The last road before you get into Floyd goes off to the left. Mm-hmm. It was tar and graveled to a certain point, and the citizen said that he was told when it was being done that this was just leftover funds and y'all needed to deal with it. Now, that's not really my question, because for you to tar and gravel that road would be in your best interest. You won't have to drive a road grader down all the way to the furthest end of the county just to scrape what's left.
Right.
And there's like about a half a mile left of it.
Yeah.
But now I don't know if it gets 50 vehicles a day.
Right, it may not, and we did that along with there was that was so wide in that section that it required no design or drainage calculations. We had to replace a pipe. It was technically a sort more of a dust suppressant as much as a paving operation. We did the same thing on Craig Mountain Road. where we had some complaints with residents who were living very close to the road. We did a short section, really in the middle of a big unpaved section, to just sort of see if this kind of thing would work, to put something down like that. Maybe in some small places. We did 2 places in the county last year. We did that road, and I can't remember the name of it either.
Thought I knew them all.
But we did that one, and we did a spot on Craig Mountain Road.
So is that done with leftover funds of some
It's
kind?
not. It's with construction funds. If it's small enough, I got the board's concurrence on that. It didn't require being in the 6-year plan because it didn't require any kind of design or anything like that. It was almost a maintenance activity. Sometimes it's a fine line between maintenance and construction. We weren't really building anything. We were changing the nature and the surface type of the road, but we weren't straightening any curves, weren't working on any slopes, weren't improving any drainage. It was strictly a surface type of thing.
So the likelihood of that getting finished anytime
that
in the next...
that road would have to be put on the 6-year plan. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Supervisor DeMont.
Just a couple of things. First, I think it was the last time that you were here, I mentioned the South Gate entrance onto 460, and that was improved almost immediately after that meeting, and it was a significant
It did,
improvement.
yes.
So thank you for that. And then I also wanted to just bring up that we have been receiving a lot of correspondence about Mount Tabor Road. And so I'm sure somebody from VDOT is regularly monitoring that road, but we've been hearing of mud in the road, damage to the road, damage to guardrails, things like that from the trucks that are traveling up and down Mount Tabor for MVP. So please continue to keep a close eye
they're
on
working on that
that one.
under a permit, and we'll have to keep a close eye to make sure they're adhering to the
Citizens
requirements of that
are
permit.
growing increasingly concerned because it's not just damage to the road, but also activities of the drivers, which I know VDOT wouldn't have any way to sway, but if you could just continue to keep a
And there
close
was also a
eye.
question, not to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
You're fine.
But on Mount Tabor Road also, we should get the through truck restriction on probably sometime next week.
Okay,
That won't affect those. That's mostly to address just like in a normal situation where you don't have that kind of pipeline activity. If you have trucks coming out of Giles, maybe on 460, who are looking at GPS and see that that's a shortcut,
Right.
it won't show up, hopefully, if we mark it as a no-through route. You can't get from 460 to Route 311.
and that was actually going to be my next question: is when is that signage going to go up? So,
it's got to be signed by everybody in the world to make that illegal, because you're taking basically a truck that's a business type of truck and you're preventing them from using a public road. So they make us go through a lot of steps and a lot of
Right.
review before we do that. But it's been all approved. To make that really effective, we had to do it on Colbank Hollow Road as well, because otherwise it could have just cut through
Right.
there, not seeing any signs. And then being with it, it's part of the town and part of VDOT, or part of the county, which is, I guess the town is technically part of the county too, but they maintain their roads. And so before we go putting up signs on town of Blacksburg's roads, we needed letters from them, consultation with them. Of course, they're all in agreement, that wasn't a problem, but it's just a lot of hoops to go through.
yeah. And then the final one is the R-Cut. And just some concerns that we're already hearing about the U-turn lanes. I don't know if you've seen them since they've been constructed, but they look pretty short and tight. And so there's been some concerns voiced by citizens about whether, for example, a truck with a horse trailer or something like that might be able to get through those U-turns. Also, the notifications that were received by citizens when Bishop Road was closed were great. And I consider myself to be at least an averagely informed citizen. I had no idea that North Main was closed.
We got a call on that today, as a matter of fact, too.
Yeah.
I'll review that. I thought we were keeping the town. The town's got a pretty good way of notifying.
Yeah, Bishop
everybody.
came out, I mean, July 5th, Bishop
Yeah.
Road will be closed, and that was very clear. And I did not know that North Main was closed until I drove down North Main and
Yeah.
hit the closed road, and I thought, well, gosh, if I didn't know this, I'm sure
Yeah.
a lot of people didn't know it. I know we have at least one citizen that's here tonight that is planning on making a public comment about the R-Cut. I don't know if it works into your schedule to stay this evening to hear that comment. If it doesn't, if you could at least watch the YouTube video of the meeting to hear that. Because it's I know that that's been a subject of a lot of frustration. And then in the same vein, Coalbank Hollow, so you've got a little U-turn past Coalbank Hollow where people can come out and U-turn there. Is there going to be some signage at the Coalbank Hollow intersection to prevent U-turns or to notify that people that U-turning there is illegal? I'm concerned that people are going to, instead of going, an extra quarter mile down the road and use the allowed U-turn, that they're going to start U-turning in Coalbank Hollow, and that's already such a dangerous intersection.
Yes, there'll be enhanced signing for that. So
Okay.
I don't think there is a left turn lane right now for U-turns at Coalbank Hollow. So we
Right.
wouldn't want people stopping in the left lane to try to U-turn.
Right.
So yes.
Yeah, and I think that's a concern that citizens have shared with me, that they're thinking people might do that just out of
Right.
impatience. And I guess that's it.
All right,
That's all I
thank you.
have. Thank you.
Supervisor Biggs?
Following along with the R-Cut, evidently some of the citizens are feeling like illegal U-turns are already being made, and the communication from VDOT, maybe this goes back to what Supervisor DeMonts was talking about, has been poor to the citizens and to the town. Now, I don't know specifically, but I think that the citizen that should be here tonight might address that also. And of course, I wanted to get back to I-81, my favorite topic. I went to your meeting and I put yellow sticky notes everywhere. You probably saw them. And I was glad that you all had that meeting. I thought it was really good. Now, what I want to happen, of course, is something to be done about it, because it's a death trap. I-81 is a death trap. So on June 26th, 3 of us attended a White House conference, and there was a young man there named Mr. Chris Mitten from the U.S. Department of Transportation. He was a government affairs officer. Well, before we could even get out anything about 81, he was warned that we were going to bring it up, because we had a contingency of probably about 240 supervisors at that conference. And so he specifically talked about a grant that Virginia didn't qualify for that had to do with 81, and I wasn't really sure about it. I wanted to sort of ask about it. He said that Virginia should resubmit this year. It was a lot of money. When I was at the when I was down in Salem, a lady came up to me and said, why didn't Virginia get some of the money that Wisconsin and North Carolina got to improve their interstate? So do you know anything about that, or is there going to be, is VDOT, or are you guys going to reapply, or how does that work?
I'm not sure what grant that is, and I'll find out
Yeah,
what
it
it
was
is.
specifically for
Yeah,
interstates.
I mean, VDOT has historically been very good at trying to find as much money as possible and take advantage of federal money that other states aren't using and aren't qualifying for. We have been able to take advantage of in the past, so it's surprising that we missed an opportunity there.
Yeah, I think it sounded like the grant went in, but we didn't get any money. But anyway,
I'll
I'm
find
all
out
for
what the
getting
story
anything
is
we
on it.
can.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to see what you do with all that
We will
information.
keep the counties updated on every step of that process. Yes.
Yeah, because everywhere I go, I advocate about, it's bad for tourism, economic development. Our volunteers are out on the road, cleaning up wrecks, and then if something were to happen in the county, they're out stuck for hours cleaning up wrecks.
Right.
And people are doing very dangerous things when the traffic is backed up. So I'm real interested into how you're going to get traffic on and off the road, because they'll go right through the median strips and go onto oncoming, traffic going the opposite way. I've seen it. I've witnessed it on
Yep.
my many adventures on 81. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Shepherd?
A couple things, just a bug in your ear to get you going about the brush. With spring and early summer, new growth, and I already see where trucks have knocked brush in the road. So I know it's going to be a problem later on. And then just a general question. You paved 460 eastbound up to the construction area at Southgate. Will that eventually be repaved to the construction where they've split it and moved the lanes?
Yes, everything within the construction limits will be
Repaved?
repaved,
Okay,
yes.
that's all I have.
Yeah, they'll put a topping on it. When they've had to dig trenches and move traffic over with, the
Yeah.
whole thing will get a
That's kinda-
final overlay.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have any questions. Thank you very much for coming this
Thank
evening.
you.
The next item on our agenda is the ACE program with Angie Covey and Chief Wilson.
Hello.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Well, and thank you for giving us the opportunity. What I wanted to do is just give you an update, kind of where we are, what the numbers look like, how our enrollment's going, and then Chief Wilson will speak to the community service component of what's been happening this summer. So to start with, we had about 350 students initially apply, which we were very excited about that number, and then we were a little nervous about that number as well, as you may have thought yourself. I guess when all the students kind of went through that process of seeing what other opportunities may be there, completing their financial aid application, checking GPAs, we ended up with about 140 students in the program. Now, when you think about the 140 students, of those students that we didn't get, of the 350, that doesn't mean that a lot of those students are not coming to New River anyway, because as you know with the program, one of the first things that we require these young people to do is go through that financial aid application, and so many of these young people who never thought they would have the opportunity find out that they're getting full federal funding. So they don't continue as an ACE student, but they're at New River because of ACE. And some of those students, though, actually do choose to stay in the program, even though they're not getting any funding from the program, because the way we present the opportunity for community service, we make it a pretty cool thing to do. So kids want to participate because all their friends are doing it, and how cool is it that the kids want to participate in something like this because their friends are doing it. So we have some good numbers with that as well. The breakdown, actually, we have roughly 14 kids from Eastmont, 17 kids from Auburn, 45 kids from Blacksburg High School, and 64 kids from Christiansburg High School. Now, of these numbers, the one that I think stands out the most to me when I look at enrollment in 2017 compared to the number of ACE kids that we have, and when I say that, I'm talking about how many kids from these high schools came to New River last year, 2017 graduates. So at Eastmont, and that's the one that stands out, last year only 6 students from Eastmont came to New River. And this year, there are 14 students coming to New River within the ACE program. Now, I can't tell you what that total number is going to be until we get into the first week of classes, because people are still registering, people are still enrolling. There's a lot of students that are going to come to New River from Eastmont that are with us because of ACE, but they're not taking ACE dollars, so they're not in that number. So there's a significant increase at Eastmont. And I think the reason there'll be many more students is when we talked about the free or reduced lunch numbers, you had around 24-25%, of course, at Christiansburg and Auburn, and then Blacksburg High School was much lower. I think it was around 17%. But Eastmont had 60%, which is a huge number. So that's one of those audiences of young people that we really want to reach out to, because a lot of them just don't think that college is available to them. So when we walk into the high school and we talk about this program, they actually go through the application process, and they're not expensive to the program at all. So of the roughly 140 students, Our anticipated cost for the school year fall 18, spring 19 is $464,000. And that number may change. At this point, if it changes, it's going to go down because we base that number on the maximum number of credits, so it shouldn't go any higher than that. If anything, it will go down. So with the funding that was made available at $300,000, that left us that leaves us $137,000 to raise. So at this point, we've raised $27,000 of that. And that was something we really couldn't get our arms around, raising funds to support the program until we knew what our numbers were going to be. Because we couldn't go ask a donor to make a contribution when we would say, well, I'm not really how much I need. Can't tell you how much I need. I just know we're going to need some. So now we have those numbers, and we're starting to work on the fundraising component. So Chief Wilson has some things he'd like to share about the community service, and then I'll have some more information about the success rates.
Good evening. First and foremost, I just wanted to tell you thank you. I've got the good part of this ride, even though I've got 140 kids that I didn't have until this started. They're a little like herding 140 cats sometimes. We're learning to use email. I thought every kid knew how, but apparently we don't. But these are the stories that we're going to bring back to you, because I'm already seeing the kids that have started their community service. They are excited about the community seeing them out there, thanking them for supporting this education. The first time you see a kid who and I get them, I get a panicked email saying I missed yesterday's community service, but I never would have been in college, I never would have been going, what do I got to do? I'll come to your office, I'll do whatever. They're panic stricken to get it done because this is so important to them. And some of the other things, and like I said, I really hope you'll invite us back midway through the year so we can actually bring some of these kids. Two of my favorites so far were one young gentleman was kind of career tracked, no education. He was going to hopefully get a blue collar type job. He was probably one of the smartest young men I'd ever met, and he was an engineer in the rough. And when we started to talk to him about the instrumentation program at New River, he just sparked up. And when I asked him, I said, do you think you could pull off some community service to make this program? That's all we're going to really ask of you. Do your homework, do your grades. He immediately wanted to be a firefighter in his community. He wanted to do it all the time. So he's planning on being a lifetime resident of Montgomery County. And so we basically just plucked a kid who was probably going to career track completely differently. And now he's going to go get a 2-year education in a highly competitive field. And in the interim, he wants to be a full-time firefighter in his community. So we're winning on both sides of that coin. Like I said, I would gladly entertain any questions. I think one thing you'll also see, which I'm really positively, I was so impressed at the leadership that I've seen out of some of these kids. The majority of them are the ones the most in need. When I first said, I'm going to kind of handpick a few of you to go back to the schools to sell not only ACE, but I want you to sell this community service, what it feels like to be part of Shawsville Rescue, what it feels like to give back to your community. Their hands immediately go up. So as soon as school starts, I'll start in the elementary or middle school, and I'll sell this story all the way up through. So it's absolutely been a phenomenal experience, and I really, really hope you'll invite us back, because I'd love to bring some of these kids up and let them tell you firsthand what it's doing for us. So.
Angie, are you ready for questions, or did you have some more?
Go ahead with questions, because I may have them within.
Okay. Supervisor Fidzikowski.
I don't have any questions, but thanks for taking on this extra responsibility. Maybe we'll find some more things for you to do.
Oh, yeah.
Supervisor DeMotts.
I don't have any questions either, beside to, again, restate my incredible support for this program. I've always believed that if at some point in somebody's life you can interrupt that cycle of poverty, that you change generations. And I get a little emotional hearing what you're saying and even thinking about it, because you're changing lives. And I'm honored to be a part of it. and I appreciate everything you're both doing.
Supervisor Biggs?
Well, I'm excited, and I was excited when you first brought this. So I would love to hear stories from some of the young people. I think that would be, when you actually hear something from a person that's being impacted, it is so powerful. So I would be all for that. That'd be great. Thank you for all you're doing and for the extra work, Chief, you've taken on.
Supervisor Shepherd?
I wish this had been going on 40 years ago, because I could have surely used it, and I'm so glad we could get this going, and I appreciate everything both of you do. I really do.
Supervisor King?
I don't have no question. Just want to thank both of you for bringing it in front of us and for encouraging the young people of Montgomery County to go to college. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank Chief Wilson, especially. You're giving up and you've committed 2 years of your life to run this program on the community service side. And that speaks volumes about you and your character. And as a citizen of Montgomery County, I greatly appreciate what you're doing. Angie, thank you for being here this evening. I don't know if you've got any other additional information, but thank you again for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I don't believe we've already addressed the addendum item, and the next item I have is public hearing in regards to the following. Public hearing was advertised pursuant to law in the Roanoke Times on July 1st, 2018, specifically resolutions including on the consent agenda that together amend the fiscal year 2018-2019 approved budget by more than 1% of the total expenditures. These resolutions include routine carry forward of funds from the fiscal year 2018 for use in the 2019 for such items as county and school capital projects, purchase orders not completed, grants, and earmarked funds. I don't believe that there is anyone who signed up for this public address. However, anyone who wished to address the board on this issue could come forward, and you would have 5 minutes, and I would just ask that you state your name and address. Seeing no one coming forward, I'll go ahead and close the public address on the amendment. The next is the general public address. In regards to public address, this is the board's time to listen to citizens irregardless of the subject. All we ask is you state your name and address and abide by our guidelines. We do have one individual who is signed up. This is our board's opportunity to listen to you. We do not typically respond to citizens' requests, but this is where you get to tell us and we listen. The first person signed up, or the only person, is Joel. Is it Herbine? Please state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Joel Irvine, 515 Farmingdale Lane in Blacksburg. So Farmingdale Lane is at the junction of North Main Street and 460 in Blacksburg, and I want to address the R-cut issue that we were speaking about previously. We all had concerns. The board very graciously put a resolution in place in support of the way we wanted to have that designed. Our hopes and dreams were not fulfilled, but we are set currently with the R-cut being implemented. We're probably not halfway through construction. But what I'm concerned about and what I want to talk about today is I think we're already starting to see some of the long-term safety issues that are going to come out of the design that's being put in place. Now, the R-cut will solve some things, but we were very worried about some things that were going to be downstream effects. So some of those have already been addressed. Illegal U-turns. So the first opportunity for somebody to make a U-turn is not the U-turn that's being built for the R-cut, it's actually Cold Bank Hollow. So people are making illegal U-turns there. The legal U-turns, they are very small, and they don't support anything but really the smallest vehicular traffic. Even large passenger vehicles have difficulty making some of those U-turns. And then the last one is speed. As somebody who lives on Farmingdale, and all I have to do is make a right on 460 East, but people coming around that blind curve, they've already adapted to the fact that the median has been shut down. Nobody's going left into Main Street. Nobody's coming out of Main Street. People are hauling down Brush Mountain coming around the corner, and they're going 75 before they get to the 65. Now, the good news is, all I had to do was very quickly contact Chief Wilson, and Chief Wilson has already taken upon himself, his department, in coordination with the Sheriff's Office, and they are going to start addressing some of these issues very aggressively. But what I really want to ask here is to really look forward, that there are going to be opportunities where Chief Wilson, the Sheriff's Office, they're going to be providing some recommendations of what needs to be done once all of this construction is completed. So what I want to say is just very much, please look out for that information. When we come back in the future, asking for money from VDOT to support Chief Wilson, the Blacksburg Police Department, the Sheriff's Office, to be able to implement those changes that will have to be put in place, we again will be asking for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other citizens? Those are all the citizens that were signed up, but is there any other citizen that would like to address the board on any issue? Seeing no one come forward, I'll go ahead and close the public address. Next item is work session. Is there a motion to go into work session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Fitchukowski?
Aye.
Mrs. Watts?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Well, good evening, everybody. One of the things that we talked about back at our retreat, back in extended work session, back in January, I used that word for so long, excuse me, was identifying issues related to county facilities and moving forward with addressing some of those. As you're well aware, we are working on the Reiner Fire Station project now, and that is well underway. We're looking at several other needs across the county and having some conversations about those. Tonight, I wanted to spend a little time talking with you about 4 facilities that are located in the downtown Christiansburg area that are all either owned or currently occupied by the county. And really want to just do a little brainstorming with you tonight. No decisions need to be made tonight, but would certainly appreciate some guidance as we continue to work with staff on how to move forward with some of these. I'm going to review with you 4 properties that the county, as I said, either currently owns or leases in downtown Christiansburg, and then talk to you a little bit about some thoughts related to those. The first building that's on the screen is the Court Services Building. This building is at the corner of Radford Road and Depot Street. Formerly served as a library for the county some years ago. I believe that it probably one time it was a church. That predates me by a good bit, but it was a library. Then the county obtained the building and has used it for court services. This building has about 2,657 square feet. I included 2 of these pictures so you could see that there is a fair amount of deterioration going on with that building. Our buildings and grounds folks are called over there periodically. I know we replaced the windows. Were you here when we did that? Yeah, I'm looking at Scott. I know we've done some work on the building. The other thing that this building is used for is in the basement, is where we use to store our voting equipment. So it's a building that it's getting a little long in the tooth. It is on a very valuable piece of property. It's at the corner of Radford Road and Depot Street, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in just a minute. This is a building that the county currently leases. A lot of folks in Christiansburg know it as the former medicine shop building. It is a property that is on South Franklin Street. We moved offices into this building in 2009, 2013, I believe. Excuse me. The magistrate's office was previously beside the former sheriff's office, and we're going to talk about that building in a minute. That building was in a very serious state of needing improvement, so we entered into a lease for this property. We moved the magistrates there, and it also gave us the opportunity to have space for the county reassessment folks. We only do reassessment every 4 years. Prior to having this facility, we were actually using Building C, but then once we moved the schools into Building C, we needed space for the reassessment too. This building is in actually pretty good shape. The landlord renovated the property for us. Thank you, Mary. This bug's got me. And I actually have something in the slides that is wrong. I discovered this afternoon when we pulled the lease on this building. We are paying about $82,000 a year to lease this space. I said we renewed in October 2017 for an additional year. We actually renewed for an additional 3 years. I thought, when I got to looking, I thought we went more than that. So we are actually in this building, or leased through 2020. Sounds like a long time, but when we talk about 2 other properties in a minute, you'll see why I think that timing probably works okay. The former sheriff's office. This is on South Franklin Street. The picture at the top is, of course, the front of the building, which is an older structure. The 2 pictures at the bottom show the tan brick additions that were made to that building, and were those made when the jail was built, gentlemen? Do y'all know back in the back? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. I think those were added later. In the picture on the bottom right of the screen, the 1-story tan addition that's off to the side is actually where county communications was. That was the 911 area before we moved into the new public safety building. And then, of course, the old building and the tan 2-story in the back were the sheriff's office buildings.
Craig, can I interrupt you?
Absolutely.
Do those 2 buildings connect? And I just can't tell from the picture.
Yes. They do.
Okay.
Yeah,
it looks like it's a little bit of a strange
You've got an old 1930s building, maybe, the old sheriff's department, and it's kind of wrapped around with this addition from the 1980s.
Thank you.
Yes, they do connect. They do connect, but as these pictures show, the spaces are very, very tight in that building. The building was built, the front was in 1945. I said the addition was in the early 70s. It may have been the 80s. I thought it was around the same time as the jail. About 6,200 square feet. So, again, I want to commend the Sheriff's Department for, I don't know how they stayed in this building as long as they did, because when they moved to the public safety building, they, in essence, quintupled their space, and they use every bit of it. So this building was extremely tight, but this building has the potential to have some renovation work done, and that's what I want to talk about in a second. The last building I wanted to bring up this evening is the former clerk's office, which is also known by some folks here as the Annex. This building is on South Franklin Street. It's immediately adjacent to the former sheriff's office. It's in front of the current county jail and sort of catty-cornered from the new public safety building. This building is in pretty sad condition. Our records say it was constructed around 1850. It's been added to, modified. There's been a lot of modifications in this building over the years. It's about 5,900 square feet. It has a real interesting history. It was actually used, county administration was in there. There were board meetings held in there. The planning offices were there. I think it's probably probably seen about every county office over its history pass through there. The last use that it had was for the magistrates. Back around 2010, 2011, we started having multiple issues with the building, and that's what led us to look outside for additional space. That's why we leased the old medicine shop and moved the magistrate there. This building's not been occupied since then. And it's in very rough shape.
Craig, and I walked by there, and I just want to point out to my fellow supervisors, the brick is painted white, but some of the brick are popping off the back, and there's actually holes where there used to be brick right in there, and they're falling out where the mortar's given way.
That building is a very well-constructed building. I mean, it amazes me that and inside, even though it looks very ragged, it's a very old, solid building. What we want to talk to you guys about tonight is what are our next steps? What do we need to do to address some of these facilities? Originally, the old sheriff's office and the clerk's office, the two buildings we talked about last, originally those were slated to be torn down when the public safety building was completed and the jail was expanded. Well, we moved forward with the public safety building project. We never moved forward with the jail project because we joined the Western Virginia Regional Jail and began using that space, so we didn't need to add space to our regional jail, to our local jail. The local jail still has some issues, and I appreciate Scott Woodrum and our general services staff working with the sheriff to try to address some things, but the need for those two buildings to come down, it was also thought those buildings needed to come down to meet parking requirements for the town of Christiansburg. Those parking requirements have since changed somewhat, and the parking is not, we don't need that property for parking. So one of the things that staff feel that we'd like to encourage you to consider is that we really need to evaluate whether it makes sense to renovate the former sheriff's office for possible use by court services and the magistrate, and determine what a budget for that would be. As I said, the building, if I can go back a couple of pictures. The building's pretty chopped, the former sheriff's office is pretty chopped up. It's a lot of small spaces, but we're not talking about moving a lot of people either. If we moved court services and the magistrate, I think the head count was about 11 folks. So there's room. The other thing that we've talked about is, as I mentioned in that bottom right picture over here, the one-story tan addition, which is where communications was, actually may work out to provide some storage space if we needed that for voting machines, other issues. So I think what we'd like to suggest from staff is that the board allow us to move forward with a more in-depth study of the former sheriff's office to see if that would make sense to use for magistrate and court services. If we do that, I'm going the wrong way, sorry. If we were to do that, then we could perhaps move court services, which would allow us to potentially sell that property at the corner of Radford Road and Depot Street. Carol had put together some analysis a couple of years ago when we were looking at this. That property is currently assessed, or it was assessed in 2015 at $429,000. So there's some value there that could be recouped. As I mentioned, we're in a lease for the old, for where the magistrate is now, of $82,000 a year, which we could avoid or put towards a county building. That last bullet you can ignore, because like I said, I knew we had done a 3-year, or I thought we had. So that's actually taken care of. The other big issue we need you to think about, and I'm not asking for a decision tonight because I think you probably will want to have some input from others on this before you decide, is what does the county want to do with the former clerk's building, the former annex? We've had discussions over the last couple of years with several interested individuals in town who want to see that maintained for historic preservation. It does have a place in Christiansburg history simply because of the age of the building. I don't see that the county has a need for that space at this time, especially if we're able to do something with the adjoining building. So I guess the 2 items of direction that I'm looking for tonight on those 4 pieces of property are: 1, is the board okay with us spending staff time and some money assessing the former sheriff's office to determine what needs to be done to be able to reuse that property? And secondly, how would you like us to proceed regarding the former clerk's office?
I'll open it up. Supervisor DeMonts.
Is that building and the former sheriff's office, are they in Christiansburg's historic district? Are we bound by any kind of rules or regulations surrounding historic structures for the town?
I don't know the answer to that for sure. I know that the clerk, this building, and I'm leaving that up because I knew that would be some discussion. I know that building is on the historic register. I don't know if there's anything that would bind us as far as the historic district.
So if it's on the historic register, we'll definitely need to investigate whether or not there's any kind of requirements, being that it's in the historic district. Is there the possibility that renovating one or both structures, the sheriff's office might qualify as well, using grant funding for historic rehab? And that's something I would just suggest we investigate as well. And then, so we own the court services building, we own the former sheriff's office, we own the former clerk's office, but we're leasing the magistrate's office.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And we've talked for several years about, we knew the leased property would likely be short-term, i.e. less than 7 to 10 years, because we knew we had these other properties opening up, plus we wanted, if these had to be torn down for whatever reason, then we were going to talk about, does it make sense to purchase property somewhere? Because we're always going to be responsible for the magistrate. We're always going to have reassessment. We're going to be responsible for court services. The other point that Sheriff Parton, I think, would make, and we've talked about, is the nice thing about the former sheriff's office, of course, is it's right adjacent to the jail.
Right.
And now when law enforcement has someone that they have to take to the magistrate's office, they have to go down to, which is not far, but it's every time you take an inmate in and out of a car, you've got a risk of an incident. If the magistrate was up here beside the jail, it would be a much safer environment.
Agreed. What I'm looking at this from a cost perspective, we're paying $1.32 a square foot a month for the rental of the magistrate's office. So I think that it is certainly in our best interest to really give a lot of consideration towards rehabilitating one of these spaces, ideally the sheriff's office, into a magistrate's office so we can get out of that lease. And I'd like to see us, as much as is possible, consolidate the buildings and facilities that we own. Just because it makes the most financial sense. Why have an asset if we're not actually utilizing it properly? So we've got a vacant structure that we're not using, that there might be some interest in the community of somebody purchasing and rehabbing that. I'm just kind of, train of thought speaking. I'm not really very organized in my thoughts about this, but I'm very glad to have it in front of us, because I think it would be, I think Todd says, I think I've heard you say this, pennies make nickels, nickels make dimes. Pretty soon you got lots of dollars. So I think it's good to have some serious conversations about these types of things. It makes sense.
Thank you. Well, and I will say this about the former clerk's office too. As you can see in these pictures, this is, as you probably remember, this building had a front porch. It had a covered porch and a roof that was getting in really bad shape. So we made a decision a few months ago to remove that. Didn't affect the structure at all, but it needed to be removed because it had a high risk of, if a piece came loose, it was going to fall right on the sidewalk. When the crew was up there taking that down, it generated a bunch of calls because people want to know what's going to happen with that building. So I think that, like I said, whatever thoughts you have there, I think you're going to want to probably air those publicly and come to a consensus, because
in spaces like that, I mean, you said that building is almost 6,000 square feet. I mean, that's an ideal rehab for housing or office facilities or something like that. I guess the main takeaway that I would leave you with, direction from me, let's investigate if there are grant opportunities available for the sheriff's office. Hey, maybe there are. There might not be, but it'd be great if there are. And consolidate our assets as much as possible so we're using our space as efficiently as we can.
Supervisor Biggs?
Well, I remember when folks were very concerned about that building and saving it for history's sake, which, there are not too many buildings like that around. And if you go to some older, well, not even older, but if you go around Virginia and go to small towns, and you'll see that a lot of them have preserved their history. So I would be really into what Supervisor DeMont said also, really looking at the whole thing, and, rehabbing or doing what we can. One thing that this sort of brings to mind is when you're doing any kind of work to get a grant for who's writing these grants? Because we don't have a grant writer, do we? And that's one thing that I've been thinking about. It's a little off the subject, but I've been thinking about that a lot over the last couple of months. Every time I hear, well, we got a grant for this and we got a grant for that, and why don't you guys get grants?
It usually falls to the department.
Exactly. So that might be something just to sort of put in the back of your head for budget time, because I think that our county is big enough, we need to have our own person, but that's just my personal opinion. But I would be following along the same route as Supervisor DeMont's with really looking at those two, because I think if you start talking about tearing down that building, it's not going to be something that is going to make a lot of people happy.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Did you say you had some interest in someone wanting to buy the annex?
There are at least 2 citizens in Christiansburg that we've met with, given tours of the building, have expressed interest in seeing something happen with the building. We've never talked about a price or talked about a purchase. And I'm sure as you discussed that I did not let anybody, I didn't want to fill the room tonight with a lot of people pleading just yet, because I wanted you to think about this and give us some direction before we start that route. But
Well, my thought is, if you were going to sell it to somebody that was going to refurbish it and put it back the way it used to be, or some use, and still leave it as a historical site. Use those funds to absolutely use the old sheriff's office to get the magistrates and court services in that building, and then you still got the one out on Depot Street, Ace Knoll. So, but you could use those funds to do a lot of that.
Supervisor King?
I think me and you talked about this building before, and you know my opinion, so I'll leave it to myself. This, you know, town of Christiansburg has done a lot of work in the town. I mean, the town looks wonderful. And for this building to be sitting there in amongst all of that, we do need to do something. And if you go down and walk around that building, I mean, you can look at the mortar coming out. To me, it's an eyesore, and I think it's a hazard.
Well, and I will say that we're doing everything we can to mitigate any hazards, you know, because it is an old building. That's the reason we took the front porch off. Actually, in that, it's hard to see, in the bottom right picture, there was actually a ramp, a wooden ramp that went up to the side door. We removed that because it was, I mean, we've tried to keep it as safe as possible because people do walk around it. They're walking to the public safety building and walking to the courthouse.
And you know, I don't have no problem if somebody wants to buy the building, but you also got to think you're around the sheriff's office, you're around the jail. You have to watch who you let move in.
That's why I wanted us to talk about it. That's why I wanted us to talk about it, because it's you know, I've heard quite a few people say you just need to take it down and make it green space. I've heard several people say, you know, it's historic, you need to renovate it. I know, I've done enough work in facilities over the years. I know it's going to be a very expensive renovation if you renovate it. And that's going to, you know, with grants, contribute. I mean, it's my concern, and I've told the two individuals that I've talked to about the building is you know, the county may donate the building to somebody if they're willing to do that. The county may make some arrangements, but with all the challenges we have with our budget already, I can't, you guys might, but I can't see us putting hundreds of thousands of dollars in that building.
And you know,
Especially not with the use for it. Sorry to interrupt
no,
you,
go
Todd.
ahead.
No, I was just saying, especially not with a dedicated use for it. I mean, it would be a lot of money to spend without a function.
and you know, I mean, you talked before about the magistrate, where they're at now. You know, we got these buildings, and we also, you know, people can't forget, we got one more floor in the 911 building vacant.
We do.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
As far as moving court services into magistrate, I think it's pretty smart to move it into something that we currently own. I like that idea. My first choice for the magistrate's office would be something attached directly to the jail, but I realize you're talking about an incredible amount of money.
Well, and the other, just to interrupt there, the other challenge is for you attach something to that front portion of the jail, you'd be blocking one of the parking areas that serves the public safety. It could be done, it'd be expensive.
Well, we could move that building that's in front of it out of the way. But with that said, I looked at the old dispatch center, and I think it would make a fabulous magistrate's office. Just the way it's constructed now, it would take very little to convert that for the magistrate. As a matter of fact, if we did it piecemeal, that would be a good place to start and get that ready before we tackle the rest of the building. But I think it's a great idea that I think we really should be looking into what it would cost to renovate the old sheriff's office building. As far as it's not just using our money wisely, by utilizing properties we already own. It's a huge safety factor. As a retired police officer, I walked many a person from the old annex building to the jail, and that's a short walk, and that's what you want. If you've got to walk anybody at all, you want a short walk. Not only that, you have backup. You have jailers, if something was to happen out in that parking lot, that could respond. You have the sheriff's office that's right there. If there's anybody in the office, they could respond. By having it down the street, to me, it's just a bad situation ready to happen. I've gone by there late at night, and you see people milling around outside, probably to pick somebody up or bond somebody out, but that's not a good situation to have people out there. In the sheriff's office or in the jail's parking lot, there's cameras, you've got people available to control a situation if something was to happen. So, I mean, to me, that's the most important part. As far as the annex building, if we could get somebody to move it, I think that would be the ideal situation. But unfortunately, I think if we wait for money either from grants or from a wealthy businessman that just loves buildings built in 1850, if we wait that long, somebody's going to get hit in the head with a brick walking behind it. I mean, never mind the porch falling off in front of it. That building is in terrible shape. And, you know, I hate to lose a piece of history, but I think that we will eventually be forced to tear it down because nobody is going to step up and do that. And I can't see the county spending our money on it because it would be a huge amount of money. I mean, we all listen to some folks come to us over the Christiansburg Institute and the problems they're having raising money. I think this building would fare a whole lot less than that. So I don't see it happening. We could be wrong. Somebody might be able to do that, but again, I don't think it should stay there. So if somebody wanted it, I'd like to see it moved. I think you'd have to use the world's largest supply of shrink wrap to wrap it before you moved it, because I think it's going to fall apart. But something definitely has to be done with it. Yeah.
Well, a few things. I concur with Mr. Fidzikowski. I think the current, or the old 911 center that we used to, the call center, is perfect for the magistrate's office. It's got the glass, you've got everything that's there, and it seems to be an easy fix for that, and that could be a one step. I'm not sure how the heating and air is hooked up there, but it also seems to be wheelchair accessible, and that's very important in regards to magistrate, because in Virginia, I can go swear out a warrant against Craig Meadows, and so we have to make sure that handicapped individuals comply with the ADA, and so I think that would be easy as well. And so we would have individuals being able to have that access. I think moving the court services is important. And there are times that a police officer will be arresting a juvenile. Well, you don't go to the magistrate's office with a juvenile. You go to the court services to obtain that petition. Sometimes juveniles are stupid kids who broke into a school bus, and sometimes juveniles are involved in serious crime. And so that may be one of the situations where having that court services closer to law enforcement would be a good thing as well. So then I like the idea of selling that piece of property, getting it back on the tax rolls. Right now, basically, as an old church, it's worth $400,000. But you could see a commercial establishment having a tax value of more than $1 million. And then you start thinking about the income on an annual basis that gets that back on the tax rolls. Also, the saving of the money from the rent, the magistrate's office, that's a huge savings. So that all makes sense. The annex is obviously harder, and one of the things as I was listening to my fellow supervisors, I'd love to see it saved, but I don't know. I mean, I think you would be talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, because as I understand it, the magistrates moved out because of black mold, and that they didn't, the cost of it, and that's what you, and I'll say this, you hear rumors through the courthouse, and that's what a lot of the folks were saying, that they had black mold.
We never tested for black mold after they moved out. The issue that we had when the magistrates were there is we had continuing issues with some roof leaks and a old pipe issue that kept, ceiling tiles kept falling. And, and the day the one fell right smack on the desk of the primary magistrate, I got a call and said, y'all got to do something. And so...
And that's reasonable. I was wondering if, we talk about, remember, for tax dollars, it's just a facelift, as long as you leave the face. And we've talked about storage area, and it's one thing to remodel something to make it suitable for offices. And that's expensive. You've got all those ADA compliances. But, we were mentioning storage space, and you had mentioned it, perhaps storage space for the voting machines. Well, perhaps if we do a facelift, make sure the building's safe, but only use it for storage and that aspect of it, so it looks good on the outside, so the people at Christiansburg can be proud of that area, but we don't spend $1 million or $1.5 million fixing it up. We basically use it like a warehouse for county storage from everything, and that might be a solution. But at the same time, I'm not an engineer, but when I see bricks that you can pull out of the wall, that seems to me as a lawyer to be a serious problem, or an opportunity, depending on your perspective.
I will tell you what we discovered, that because I agree, if you can take a brick out, that should be an issue. On that top left picture, that corner where those bricks, those walls were a foot thick.
Okay.
So you can actually take a brick out and there's still plenty behind it. Now, but that being said, that wall, the entire wall is deteriorating. So yeah, you can take a brick. We haven't drilled behind it to see how bad it is behind the brick. So yeah, we've got to do something with that building.
So if I hear from my fellow supervisors, I believe that there is a consensus to move forward and spending money in regards to the old 911 call center and the sheriff's office to see that remodeled. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, you're requesting us to determine a budget, but it's a little bit.
Well, and that's a next step. That's not tonight.
Okay.
We can't determine a budget till we have an A&E firm, and
Right.
as I've mentioned to several of you before, what I've learned over the years is what you think might be $25,000 or $50,000 when you look at the electrical, you look at the HVAC, you look at the plumbing, because if you're going to use it for a long period of time, you don't want to just put a couple of Band-Aids and move people in.
Right.
You want to fix them. Fixing gets expensive fast. So that's why we need to look at numbers, because I don't think this will be the case, but it could be when we look at the sheriff's office. We may come back and go, guys, that's going to be real expensive. I don't know that we want to do that. But we need to take that next step. We haven't done that.
So I guess that's what I was thinking, consensus, not just to take that initial step, and then perhaps that we need to, and I don't know the dollar figure, how much are we talking about evaluating the building on the annex to see if it is structurally sound or something along, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to spend tens of thousands of dollars.
Well, it wouldn't be, I'm thinking between 10 and 20, but I could be, because you've got to get in there and do some of the things I was talking about to test it. The question is, and that's, you spend $15,000 to evaluate it, and it comes back, yeah, that's a sturdy building. Okay, well then what?
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, since that seems to be a trickier issue, why don't we all chew on that one for a little while? Does that seem to be a reasonable thing, and that instruct staff to
Yeah,
go
I
forward
think
on
we've
the
already
other?
given enough work with the first.
Well, and one thing I heard tonight that candidly, I hadn't sounded out with staff that I think we need to do as well, is I want staff to sit down with the town of Christiansburg and say, okay, here's what we're thinking about these buildings. Tell us what requirements you're going to have. Are there historical requirements?
And to Todd's point about it being an eyesore and the rest of the downtown area in Christiansburg being, they've spent so much time and effort in improving it. I didn't even think about that, and I think that's extremely valid. I would be very interested to hear.
Well, the first time Steve Biggs came to town, one of the first meetings we had, he was talking about renovating the downtown, the former Christiansburg manager, and he said, "What are y'all going to do with the old clerk's office?" I said, "Here, take it." Take it, I'll give it to you. He didn't bite.
Darn.
But that is something we've got to look at. And I do, like I said, I know that if you decide to spend money on it, you're going to hear from some folks. If you decide to tear it down, you're going to hear from some folks.
And if you sell it, we've got the sheriff's department, the jail, and once we sell it, we may not be able to control who's it's sold to in the future. And I can't, it doesn't seem to make sense to me for us to let go of that property, not where it's located.
No, I agree on that.
Thank you for the direction.
Well, maybe you can talk to Mayor Mike and tell him we'll donate it to him.
Tell them it can be the first mayor or the first wife's house.
There you go.
For the first dog and.
I'm sure that would immediately be followed with, well, how big a check are you giving me with the key? But
Could you just, as you check in that, just for kicks and giggles, just to figure out what it would cost to tear it down?
sure, those are demolition's always a fairly easy number because they don't have to evaluate a whole lot. They just take square footage and floors and give you a number. But we'll pull all that together. And if it's okay, I'd like to come back maybe 60 days and talk about this one some more, because this was sort of phase one of facilities. Phase two of facilities is we need to spend some more time. We talked about it as part of the Public Service Authority discussions, but we need to spend some time talking about the property in the back, because general services, the garage, buildings and grounds, we've
PSA.
got a lot of stuff that, and the comment I heard earlier that I fully agree with is we need to be as efficient as we can, and we need to maximize the properties that we have. If that means we can go from 7 or 8 buildings to 2 or 3 buildings, that's what we need to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Is there a motion to come out of work session?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, tell you what, folks, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
30-minute break?
No, 10-minute break. And try to get started. It looks like it's about 20 till, and we'll try to get started back up at about 10 till.
About 10:30?
No. Next item on our agenda is that there was something that Mr. Meadows wanted to bring
One
up.
thing I left out in my presentation, and I wanted to give him the recognition that he's due. Josh Rosenfeld is the contributor of the pictures that were in my PowerPoint presentation, and not only contributed those, he gave me a bunch of pictures. So and did a wonderful job, Josh. I really appreciate it. If you want to get into more detail on any of those buildings, I got the pictures, and it's thanks to Josh.
That picture of the magistrate's building made it look very like pastoral.
Yeah.
Looks great.
The one set of staircases in the sheriff's department, if I remember correctly, you had to, when you walked in the door, you had to close the door to walk around to be able to go up the stairs.
That's correct.
So, I mean, it's non-ADA.
Non-ADA compliant.
No. All right, the next item on our agenda is consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. Moss?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
First,
Six
item.
ayes.
6 ayes, yes. I could vote twice, it'd be fine. The next item on our agenda is the Sojourn Center real estate tax exemption under old business. Specifically, this is where Sojourn Center has requested the Board of Supervisors for exempt status for 2 vacant parcels of land. Now, Marty, do I need to read the rest of this?
No, what's before you tonight is the ordinance. If you could read the ordinance title.
Okay. And just the title?
Yeah.
An ordinance designating a certain real property owned by the Sojourn Center designated as tax map 347-A52, parcel ID 024427, and number 2, tax map 346-A8, parcel ID 004225, located in the town of Blacksburg, Prices Fork Magisterial District in the county of Montgomery, Virginia, exempt from taxation. And so at this point in time, is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing no discussion, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Fitchukowski?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
6 ayes.
The next item is DePaul Community Resources request for tax exempt status, specifically an ordinance designating certain parcel of real property owned by DePaul Family Services, Inc., designated as tax map 526-A-251, parcel ID 019464, and tax map 526-A-252, parcel ID 008113, located in the town of Christiansburg, Roanoke Magisterial District in the county of Montgomery, Virginia, exempt from taxation. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
I don't think it, if you can afford $1 million for property, I don't think you need to be tax exempt.
Am I looking at this right? Is it just about an acre of land? Is that?
It's the old Sherman's and
Smithman's.
Smithman's building.
Yeah.
Before we get too deeply in the weeds on a conversation about this, Marty, if you could pull up the ordinance.
Yeah.
And under the whereases where it has the first list, you've got number 2 mentions the Sojourn Center, number 3 mentions the Sojourn Center, and I think that's all. So there's some...
Sorry?
It should have
It says,
DePaul Family
yeah.
Services and
No current annual alcoholic beverage license for serving alcoholic beverages has been issued by the Virginia Alcoholic Beverage Control Board to the Sojourn Center.
Okay.
So we've got some
That should be
misprints
DePaul Family
in there.
Services, Right. We'll make that change.
Good catch.
Thank you. Sorry.
My mother was an English major in college.
So
I got real familiar with the red
I
pen
know
when I was in high
there's a
school.
motion and a second. And we're in the discussion phase at this point. Would y'all consider a friendly amendment amending the word Sojourn Center to DePaul Family Services, Inc.?
Yes.
Would you accept? Okay.
Sorry about the interruption.
Can't bring
No.
up any of my...
Now, I believe Mr. Supervisor King had spoken, Supervisor Fitchukowski.
I thought there was some discussion with the town in regards to this, but I'm trying to recall. I think we had asked them if we make this tax exempt, how it affects them. Did we ever get an answer?
We cannot make anything exempt in the town.
Okay. So they would still be required to pay town taxes?
Yeah, it would be much less.
Well, I did a little bit of research on DePaul Family Services, and I do not know anybody over there, but it sure looks to me like they provide a very valuable service, and they would be the only brick and mortar facility of its kind in the New River Valley. So I think it's pretty important that they're here, and I think it's important for our citizens, and therefore I think we should support it. So.
Was there any other discussion?
Well, they, with all due respect, they do a good service, but they get paid for it.
Any other discussion?
They're a nonprofit,
They get paid for it.
but what does that pay for?
Salaries.
It doesn't pay for $1 million building. That's money donated, just like the Sojourn Center gets the money donated.
This money, for this here, money's not donated to them. They charge for their service.
But the facility, what we're voting on is for their tax exempt status, and you're saying they're wealthy because they have $1 million to buy this property, they should be able to pay taxes. Well, that money this $1 million came from donations, not from them billing for services.
Not from donation. They bought these buildings.
Right. With money that was donated to them by other people. Am I wrong?
Where they got
Does
paid
anybody
for
else know that?
Got paid for their fees.
I don't believe so.
I have, because of my role in my other job as guardian ad litem, the Paul's Family Services helps to find foster families for children, and they do charge the county as well as other localities a fee for finding those individuals and for training and counseling services and those types of things that they provide. Now, I don't claim to be an expert on that, but there is a fee that they charge for those services. Just like the Sojourn Center, there may be a fee that's associated with that type of hospice care. Now, they may only take Medicaid patients or the like, and they may limit themselves, but there is a fee charged that I'm aware of. I think the county spends several $100,000, and I'm looking at Angie, per year with the Paul Family Services, and I believe other localities are similarly aligned.
And I would expect they would have to charge some fees to pay their employees. I would expect that. But it seemed like when I was looking into them, they had their financial records, and their money comes from donations as far as making big purchases like this. That's what I got out of what I read. But I don't know that for a fact.
Other discussion? Hearing no other discussion, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Fisakowski?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
No.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
Okay, I have 5 ayes, 1 no.
Next item on the agenda is new business.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, first item of new business this evening is to ask the board to approve revisions to the personnel policies and procedures. As you're aware, with the new budget, we have a new compensation and classification plan, and Chapter 4, Sections 4.1 to 4.6 in the personnel policies needed to be revised to reflect some of the changes. Specifically, the former comp plan had a reference to a midpoint. We don't use the midpoint system anymore with the new plan, so we had to get all that cleaned up. So this is just to bring our personnel policy and procedure in line with our compensation policy.
So moved.
There's a motion.
Second.
Any further, the motion by Supervisor DeMont and a second by Supervisor Shepherd. Any other discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor DeMotts?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Fisakowski?
Aye.
And Chair Tuck?
Aye.
I have 6 ayes.
The next item on the agenda is in regards to the appropriation of funding for a burn building. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there a
Second.
discussion? So there was a motion by Supervisor King and a second by Supervisor Vice Chair DeMont. Hearing no discussion, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Fisakowski?
Aye.
Supervisor DeMotts?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
I have 6 ayes.
Appropriation of state funding for social services. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
So that motion was by Supervisor King and a second by Supervisor Biggs. Is there any discussion? Marty, and I just want to clarify one thing. Someone asked me the question recently. There's two types of Department of Social Services boards, a policy-making board and an advisory board. And our Board of Supervisors, or our Social Services Board, is not an advisory board. It's actual policy, and they operate the day-to-day functions. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And the director works for that.
Right, not for us.
That's correct.
Any other discussion? And there was a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Supervisor DeMoss?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
And Chair Tuck?
Aye.
I have 6 ayes.
Next item is additional funding for a school resource officer transfer from special contingencies to the Sheriff's Department. Is there a motion?
Motion. Second.
Is there any discussion? So that was a motion by Supervisor Fidzikowski and a second by Supervisor Shepherd.
Just, can we clarify exactly where this person is going to be going? It's not like a person that's going to be in a school, it's a person that's going to be traveling, right?
As my understanding, I don't want to disclose, I hope the sheriff doesn't want to necessarily disclose, but I did read in the paper where I guess Roanoke County's doing out of their elementary schools, I want to say they've got 18 and they're floating 2 resource officers, if I read that article right, Roanoke Times. But it's my understanding, or from when we talked about it, that that would be a potential that this officer would be floating around.
You done?
Well, I'm not going to be done until we have one for every elementary school, but you go ahead.
Yeah. Was the last time we brought this up, and I'm not against resource officers whatsoever. Last time we talked about this, we put it on the table till we had a plan. What's the plan?
I think that's a great question because that's kind of where I am too.
Well, that's what I ask.
Yeah.
And
When-
evidently, we don't know the plan.
Well, when we finished the budget, this 85,000, and Supervisor Fidzikowski might actually have the answer for this. We had that 85,000 that we had set aside to address security needs in the schools. And then part of what we were going to do is have you participate in the task force to address security needs from within the schools. So has this kind of bubbled up from that, or
No,
where did
we
it come
we all
from?
agreed to fund 1 resource officer this year. We all agreed to that.
The school, the task force, the school?
No, us. We did it. We said that's what we were going to use that money for, to give the sheriff's office 1 school resource officer. The rest of it, putting me on that committee, was more so that this board would be better informed as to what's being discussed as far as safety measures.
Okay.
So no, that's what we set that money aside for, was for a resource officer. It was our experiment for 1 year.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, is that not correct, what we said? We was going to wait and let the school get with the sheriff's department and see what we needed? And
Yes.
had a plan?
As I understood our vote, and what I believed I was voting for, is we were going to utilize 1 resource officer, set aside this money for 1 resource officer. I know the sheriff is here tonight in regards to it. I assume he would be happy to answer questions. I know that law enforcement are reluctant to say this is our exact plan for this officer. But then I thought, and one of the things that you had said is, this is a 1-year position. There's a potential that we might not fund it next year. But that we would be looking and we would have a separate vote on this. But that was what I thought that this money had been set aside for, is 1 resource officer.
Was the school, did anybody talk to the school and see if that's what they wanted?
No, they wanted 8.
I would like to see this before it was put on the agenda, for this board to know what was going to happen. I mean, like Mary said, where's he going to be? Or she, whichever.
I see the sheriff is, does the board wish to hear from the sheriff?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
I would be reluctant to say what school or which schools, but I can tell the board that that position will be hired as a school resource officer and will be in one or more of those 4 elementary schools.
That are in the county. All the schools are in the county, but we're
Yes.
specifically talking outside the town limits.
Yes, and my goal from the get-go was to take care of those 4 when I realized the 8 was out of the question. And I didn't have much support. My goal was for the 4 outlying elementary schools that take us, as I outlined earlier, the response time that is far greater than any of the other schools in the county, in the towns. So if we're trying to get every one of them protected, I think it's obviously more important, if we can't have them all, to take care of the ones that are furthest away.
Sheriff Parton, would this be an elementary resource
Yes.
officer? Okay.
Yes, and already have one trained both in SRO and DARE.
So you've got one that's ready to go
I
for the
have
new
a
school
female
year?
that's ready and willing, and she is a great road officer now, and she's ready to go.
Well, I'm with Supervisor Biggs when she said she wouldn't be done until she had one in every school. So,
Because I understand where you're coming from, Sheriff, because we've talked about this on
Yes.
many occasions.
Yes, ma'am.
But I was in Harding Avenue when April 16th happened, and it didn't matter that it was right there. Okay, so my thing is, if somebody's going to come in a school, they're going to come in a school. It doesn't matter how far away an officer might be.
Well, I was in Norris Hall when April 16th happened, so I'm right there with you.
Yeah, so I'm not going to be happy until all the schools are
Right.
covered. Better start with one, I guess.
I believe that was the whole idea, is to start with one to see how it works out before we invest in more. Because myself and I believe Supervisor King, we both kind of look at it like, and this is during budget season, we discussed this, that nobody else was doing it. Not that we have to do what everybody else does, but would it work in elementary school? Or would it be better to harden the schools to make it harder to get into? And it was a consensus that we would try it for a year, see how it works out. If it works out good, if we're getting the best bang for our buck, then maybe instead of discontinuing one, we'll add 3 more. And maybe by sometime down the road, we could finish the rest of them out. If that is the way that the school administration and the sheriff's office feel is best, maybe.
So you'll have a little bit of money left after you pay for the resource officer out of the $85,000.
No, he's not, I don't think that's what the resolution says.
But we set aside $85,000, correct?
We set aside
Okay,
$85,000.
and so where that rest of that money, is it just going to be in that fund?
Stay in, excuse me, yes ma'am, it'll stay in the special contingencies. It'll leave a balance of, is that about 27.2?
The salary and benefit package was much less than that.
Right, right.
And we could still use some of that money for hardening issues. Some of the issues, as Supervisor Fizikowski shared, some of them are inexpensive. Some of them are much more expensive, but maybe we could address some of them with that remainder of contingency fee money.
If I may, part of the reason this is before you tonight is because we're going to advertise for that road position. But listening to you all tonight, it doesn't sound like that money might be there. So in essence, if we're just taking one of my road officers and throwing them into the school as the SRO and not replacing them, then that's not helping us.
Right.
Well, no, this,
So I guess my question is, do I have the go-ahead, which was the initial email, to advertise for this position? because I'm going to have to fill.
You won't unless the board approves this resolution tonight. If they approve the resolution tonight, this will move the money into your budget to cover that SRO.
That's one.
Yeah.
And this is just for 1 year, right?
Well, I guess every budget is just for
That's
1
what I'm
year, but
saying.
we could vote to take the money out at some point in time. Obviously, we provide funding to the sheriff's office. If it doesn't work, if it turns out that this is the worst idea in the world, or not even but it will come up again, I have a feeling, next budget season.
I mean, I think that's what the sheriff's asking.
I believe this is going into the budget, and we would have to pull it out. And I guess I would tell the sheriff, if you implemented any program, at least from my perspective, and it turned out it didn't work, then I would reevaluate it. And let's say that the elementary school officers don't work, well, then I might obviously look in a different direction. I guess this is a step for all of us to see how it works. Any other questions of the sheriff? Sheriff, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
There's been a motion and a second and a fair amount of discussion, but I don't want to cut anybody off. Is there any other discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Shepherd,
Aye.
Supervisor King,
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski,
Aye.
Supervisor Demots,
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs,
Aye.
and Chair Tuck.
Aye.
I have 6 ayes.
Forgive me, my iPad's not wanting to load. There we go. All right, next item on our agenda is County Attorney's Report.
Nothing tonight, Mr. Chair.
Next item on the agenda is County Administrator's Report.
Just one item tonight. I want, some of them are leaving now, but I wanted to thank all the staff that has been here tonight. Of course, Jen's always with us. Thank you for sticking around, Jen. We had several other department heads, and Billy, Bobby, thank you guys for being here tonight as well. Nothing else to report.
Well, Supervisor Fidzikowski, do you have anything to report?
I do not.
Supervisor Biggs, do you have anything to report?
Yeah, just 4 things. First one, Nanny Hairston, the life and legacy of Nanny Hairston is going to be celebrated at the Christiansburg Library at 2 p.m. on August 11th. That's a Saturday, and the board should be receiving some invitations to that. The VACO Region 10 meeting is going to be held Tuesday, July 24th from 2 to 4 in Chatham. So I'll be interested to see when that VDOT meeting is, since it sounds like it's on the same day. With the Airport Authority, I wanted to let you know that we are, the parking lot is being paved, and we're in the process of picking, which I had no idea what this was until I got into it, a fuel branding. So like, we have to go through proposals and see which brand of fuel would be the best for the airport, and can be delivered, and who's going to provide the best service and incentives. So it's sort of been an interesting process. And then the other thing I wanted to report on is when we did go to, when Steve and Daryl and I went to the White House conference, we received this department contact list, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone got a copy of it, so I was going to give it to Craig. It was a very interesting conference as far as listening to everything, but when it all came down to where the rubber hits the road, I'm always interested in the money part. Todd, that money. And I didn't see too much of that floating around, but what I will have to say is that the person that organized this, a young lady named Brittany, did a great job of getting everyone herded through the White House and then getting them over to the conference center. The security was really something to go through, but we all made it through.
She was from Abington, Virginia.
Yeah, we all made it through, and she did a great job. She answers her email. People were very nice and helpful, so we all made it there and back.
She even answered her own phone when you called her.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like Todd went, Steve went, Daryl was going to go, and you didn't get to go at the last minute, and I went.
Anything further?
No, that should do it.
Supervisor Shepherd.
Just one thing, I want to remind everybody about the Brianna Hurst Memorial Pool Tournament at Bull and Bones on Saturday. And it starts at 10 a.m. and runs to 10 p.m.
Are you going to be there?
I didn't know it was going to be that long, but I want to be there. Yeah.
Supervisor King.
I just got one thing, and I just found out about this today. When the state passed their budget, they had to come up with the buying volunteer fire department turnout gear. Did you hear about that, Billy? I talked to Nick Rush this evening about it, and he's going to send me some information, or Craig some information about it. And he said he thinks Neil will be getting information on it too, but it was in their budget to help volunteers buy turnout gear. Good thing. Yes.
Anything else?
No, it's all.
Okay. Supervisor DeMoss.
3 things, and they're all fun items. This Saturday, the 14th, is the Mount Tabor Rotarian Club Fish Fry. That's at Slusher's Chapel on Mount Tabor Road. That's from 5 to 7. And our sheriff has already left, but he stole my coleslaw serving spot the last time, so we might duke it out this time so I can serve coleslaw again.
That's good.
Also, this coming Saturday, and I mention this because Sarah is not with us this evening, and I know she would mention it if she was here. Habitat for Humanity is having a special Women Build event. So this is an event for, I think they're marketing it as women who know their way around a hammer or want to learn. Please let Mitchell know that I'm specifically requesting a chainsaw for my responsibilities, because he won't let me have one. But this is an opportunity for women in the community to come out to the Christiansburg Habitat site that's at 550 Johnston Street from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock on Saturday and participate in building some Habitat homes there. And then the final thing, tomorrow evening at 5:30 at Blacksburg Municipal Park, Sustainable Blacksburg is going to be having a picnic potluck, and they have asked me to come and speak on behalf of sustainability issues in the county. And so I'll be doing that tomorrow evening. That is free and open to the public. It is a potluck, so BYOD. Bring your own dinner. But somebody from the town will also be there presenting on sustainability issues in the town of Blacksburg. So I'm excited to give an update on what we're doing at the county level.
Well, thank you very much. It's amazing sometimes the power of some of these meetings that we go to and the power of the press. Steve had went to a meeting down in Roanoke along with, I believe it was Henry Showalter, and there was a discussion about extending the trail from the greenways down in Roanoke County to Christiansburg. We had that joint meeting with the town of Christiansburg, and that issue was raised. That hit the papers, and when it hit the papers and Yan wrote an article about it, I got a text message from Naomi Huntington, and she's on Radford City Council, and mentioned and said, "Don't forget about us." Well, that triggered something in my brain, and I started thinking about there's an existing trail that runs from the town of Pulaski all the way to Galax, and that if we could work together as localities, we could create a trail that you could get on a bike or you could walk from Roanoke City all the way to the city of Galax. With that being said, I called each one of the supervisors and received your support and started contacting other localities. I've had contact with Roanoke City, the city of Salem, Roanoke County, town of Christiansburg, town of Blacksburg, Pulaski, city of Radford, town of Pulaski, Grayson County, Carroll County, Wythe County, as well as the city of Galax. Each one of those members was excited about a concept where you would get on a trail in one valley and end up in the other. Huckleberry started roughly 20 years ago, and this is a long-term project. we have some other Parks and Rec needs, and we've got with the ball fields down in Shawsville, as well as the park out in Roanoke. But we have the opportunity, I believe, that has been created to take that next step and start that 20-year process of creating a trail that would run from Roanoke City to Galax City. And whatever that name may be, one of the things in discussion, I said that our board would consider sending out a letter about forming a committee, utilizing elected officials as well as volunteers. I had the opportunity to speak with Bill Ellenbogen. As many of you know, he is a driving force behind the Huckleberry Trail, and he agreed to provide his talents to this committee. And moving forward, our goals would be that if, let's say, the city of Salem made a request from the federal or state governments for a grant, that all of us as localities would get behind that. If that grant was granted and there was matching funds, Salem would have to come up with the matching funds, but we would all support that project. If we were looking for a bridge to connect us to Pulaski County, and Pulaski County went forward and needed matching money, both of us would match because that would be meeting that bridge. Setting it forth, and Marty kind of gave us a little bit of tentative guidelines about this committee, and it would be subject to FOIA because it would be elected officials, but it would be a start. And so at this point in time, I'm looking for consensus, but I also wanted to reassure our staff that I understand that we've got some big projects, both with the two parks in Shawsville and Roanoke, that we've just heard some reality about the sheriff's office and some of the other demands, but Parks and Rec is going to need an additional person. One, to be able to manage those new parks and that we're adding on, but also I would hope that part of their job would be to focus on extending this trail, running it through. In speaking with my fellow supervisors, I can think of no better folks to lead this than Supervisor Fidzikowski and Supervisor DeMonts. And so they both agreed to head this up for Montgomery County. And so with a consensus of our board, I would like to be able to send a letter to all of those localities I've mentioned, asking to form a committee, working through how we're going to develop this, but keeping in mind that we are not going to be spending Montgomery County taxpayer dollars in other counties, but we'll be expending some of our resources. When we see a grant coming through, we're going to be expected to get behind it for the city of Radford or the city of Galax. And so at this point in time, I'm asking for consensus to be able to send a letter to start forming this committee.
Just one thing.
Sure.
I'm good with sending that letter, but watch when you commit money.
I will. And again,
I mean, you know, if the letter says, you know, if you build a bridge, we'll pay our part of it, a bridge might be $1 million.
And it might be, but if a bridge is $1 million and the federal government's picking up the tab for 80%, and then we're picking up the tab for 10, and Pulaski's picking up the tab for 10, and it connects both localities. And I use that as an example. There might be some grants where we're talking about a portion of the trail that might run through 2 or 3 jurisdictions. But also keep in mind that there is a new river trail that already exists and is part of a state park. And in some of my discussions, there seems to be a receptiveness to expand that state park potentially and keep it running through the New River Valley. And that may be some state dollars that might be available. But I also want you to think about the economic engine. If you can think about the folks, typically we have lots of folks who come in the fall to fill up our hotels for football games, for graduation in the spring. But in the summer months, we don't have our hotels and restaurants filled up. But when you bike in the summer, you bike and maybe into the fall some, and that could help fill those hotels up. And I believe it could be an economic engine for all of Southwest Virginia. So, thumbs up?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely.
Thank you all very much. With nothing further being before the board, this meeting's adjourned.